Welcome to the Global Missions Podcast, a program for Christ followers who want to participate more effectively in God's work, both at home and to the ends of the earth. Visit us at globalmissionspodcast.com to find show notes, resources, and previous episodes, or to suggest a particular topic or guest you would like to hear featured on the program. You can also engage with us through Twitter and Facebook. We would love to hear from you. And now, here's your host, Rob Magwood, better known to his friends as Mags.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Global Missions Podcast. Today, we continue our discussion about the Millennial factor, how we will fully embrace new millennial workers into missions activity around the world. Our guest is Emma Brewster, and if you didn't hear the first part of this interview, you can find it in our previous episode, number 47. Before we get to part 2 of this interview, we'd like to share with you this missions resource.
Your profession, your skills, your passions. It's you making disciples of the nations. Crossworld desires to help you engage the world's least reached marketplaces in the ways God has gifted you. To learn more about Crossworld and their global opportunities, we invite you to visit crossworld.org today. And now, here's today's interview.
We welcome you back to part 2 of this interview with Emma Brewster as we talk about the Millennial factor, embracing the potential of a new generation. Emma, I wonder if you could imagine speaking to a missions committee, to a church, to a ministry that really does want to do a great job of welcoming millennials in. They realize it's challenging, but they want to do a great job. What advice do you have for, I'll say, the older generations, the baby boomers or us Gen Xers? What advice do you have first for that group?
2 L's, if I can say that: listen and learn. And I think I would say that in terms of both baby boomers and Gen Xers for millennials, but also millennials with Gen Xers and baby boomers. I think a mission committee sitting down in their church with a bunch of millennials and listening and learning from them, asking questions and just hearing would go a long way towards them understanding and seeing how they can best be engaging with that particular age range within their church. I think as well, creating on a mission committee, often a mission committee can be made up of baby boomers. And what would it look like to have a mission committee that actually is intergenerational? Because there's huge value in that, and a real desire on behalf of millennials to be a part of something that is intergenerational. Mm-hmm. And then being ready and prepared to journey with the millennials, to kind of walk with them. Discipleship and mentorship is critical. The millennials are very much a generation that needs affirmation, and I think often we overlook that because they appear to be competent and confident, but they actually are a generation that really love being valued and need to be valued, because they constantly are on their phones or on Facebook or on whatever, often to see if a post that they've put up is liked, often to see how many people are following them on Twitter, whatever it might be. And I think we need to journey with them and constantly be affirming them and valuing them in their journey towards cross-cultural mission.
This will be really important for that listening and learning stage, I think. Just as I consider some of the things you've mentioned here, the challenges that raises for some, and saying how the expectation of mentorship, for example, is significantly elevated, and even having common understanding of what we mean by mentorship. I visited with one of our missionaries overseas who is very optimistic about millennials and received them. And his vision of mentorship, that was part of what he said I'd like to do. His vision of mentorship was getting together, once or twice a week for a cup of coffee. But the millennials that came over, they wanted to be together once or twice a day for coffee.
Yeah.
And just having common expectations that need to be informed, and making sure even some of the words we use have, we're understanding each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think because we're more task-driven, that relational aspect is not there so much in terms of giving the time. So we would far rather give a task and then see them go and do it than to be relational, which raises an interesting question globally, because, of course, in the non-Western world, community and relationship is critical and vital. But I think with baby boomers in the non-Western world, there's an element of the listening and learning where sometimes there's a huge value on respect for elders. But sometimes that can mean millennials feel that they might be overlooked because their opinion isn't as important.
Yeah, boy, this is all kinds of interesting elements here. You mentioned the global view. It may mean that there are leaders in other parts of the world, in the non-Western world, who will be helpful to us, or might even be better at engaging millennials than we are as leaders in the West.
Yes, I mean, I think we've got to learn together. It goes back to the global community. Mm-hmm. We need to be using one another to understand one another well.
Yeah, the term humility comes to mind as well. We're going to need humility to go forward to do this well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a bit of advice there for us who are the leaders and maybe a generation or maybe a couple of generations ahead of these dear millennials. Some advice for them. I'd like to turn it the other way now. What advice do you have for millennials as they're approaching ministry potential, ministry opportunities in churches or agencies? How can they approach this in a healthy way?
I think the same in terms of listen and learn. I think as well to be able to understand where the baby boomers are coming from. I mean, in a number of different conferences I've been to, we've had an interesting time where we've had some time with the baby boomers and asked them their view of the millennials, and then we've had time with the millennials to ask them their view of the baby boomers. And I think often there is a missing of each other in the conversation, and baby boomers want to learn how to use technology and so for millennials to be able to engage on that one, that it's not that the older generation is not wanting to or not seeing the value of technology, but often it's because they're not necessarily knowing how to use it in a way that is effective for their generation. Mm-hmm. So I think it's got to be a two-way thing of listening and learning to one another.
Well, that'll be helpful too, and I think that will be received well by the baby boomers, if I can say that, the boomer generation as well, realizing that it is a two-way learning. It's not just one way. It's not just accommodating. It's coming together in the middle. Yep. And for the millennials to approach it with that humble spirit as well, and willingness to change and willingness to grow. It's not just saying, well, what exactly do you want, and building it exactly the way. I really love the idea of a healthy multi-general organization. Not just a millennial organization or a boomer organization.
Yeah, and I think actually that's what millennials are wanting. I think there are a lot of assumptions that baby boomers can make of millennials, and there are a lot of assumptions that millennials can make of baby boomers. And I think as they work together, they often surprise one another at how they complement one another and can produce a much better outcome as a result.
Yes. And we go back to the body mentality, that we're created different as members of a body, the body of Christ, I mean, in this case. And by serving together, we don't have the same talents or capacities, but as we bring those together, we are enriched, not competing with each other, but complementing each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Humility is the key on both sides, I think.
Emma, I wonder whether you could relate to us a situation where you have seen this work beautifully, the way we hope, where boomers and millennials have worked together well. Share with us something that encourages us that this can happen.
My one example that springs to mind immediately is a big event that I was at. So this isn't a small scale thing, but where it was the last year in August in Indonesia at the Lausanne Young Leaders Gathering. And there was a beautiful display there of what it is for there to be the younger generation and the older generation working together in terms of dialogue forums, working together in terms of outcomes as to where we were heading. And I think as well, having at that event, there were 1,000 millennials that were there, and there were 250 mentors that were there to just be there to listen, to engage, to advise, and to walk. And what has come out of that has been amazing, really. And that's kind of on a big scale. But for me, being a part of that, it just made me realize the more I can be doing that on a smaller scale, the better. So being involved in ministry together, if I'm going off to a ministry event, to go with a millennial, and even the journey of going there, stopping off and having a coffee, all of that is significant to journeying into what it is to do ministry together and what ministry can look like.
Well, I appreciate so much the optimism that comes from that. I'm concerned that we're at risk of a pessimistic view of each other. And that leads to a lack of understanding, a lack of initiative and guardedness. And we do want to be optimistic and step toward new potential. Yes, it's different, but wonderful opportunities opening for the kingdom work because of these new workers and the capacity they bring.
Absolutely.
As we begin to wind down our time, Emma, I wonder if there are resources that you can recommend to our audience that would help us to listen and to learn. Perhaps books, articles, websites, things like that would be helpful.
There are books-wise, one specific book I would recommend would be Millennials and Mission, A Generation That Faces a Global Challenge by James Ramo. Another article / research that I've just been reading is called Making Space for Millennials, a Blueprint for Your Culture, Ministry, Leadership and Facilities, which has been written by, it's a Barna Group report. And that's well worth a read, and it explores those different areas of culture, ministry, leadership and facilities. And then if you just put in millennials in YouTube, you will come up with an enormous amount of things. I've found there's somebody called Simon Sinek. I've found some of his YouTube clips very helpful, sometimes a little bit negative, but raises some good issues and some fun issues as well. So there's so much out there to explore. But one thing I definitely would say is don't allow the books and the research and YouTube to be what educates you solely, but make sure that you're actually engaging with millennials within your church, within your community, within your area to fully understand.
Right. Not to just have it theory coming out of what you're reading, but to actually engage with them.
Yeah.
Emma, you had also mentioned a resource that might help us think through the interaction between millennials and the generation that is following them, that is younger than them, and that interaction. Tell us about that resource.
It's an excellent book called The Generation Z Factor, which has been written specifically for businesses to prepare them for the next generation that's coming through. And I think when we talk about millennials, we must quickly talk about that next generation, Generation Z, because millennials and Generation Z, I think, are going to work together in quite a unique and very effective way moving forward into the future.
And we will provide links to those materials in the show notes that you can find on the website for our listeners. Well, Emma, this has been wonderful. We've just scratched the surface of so many angles of this big topic. If our listeners would like to learn more from you, how can they follow you or be in touch with you?
I would love to say that I'm a millennial myself and they can follow me on Twitter, but I'm not so faithful on that. But certainly through email, Facebook, WhatsApp, they are able to get in touch with me. And probably best to say all of that information will be on the notes.
So as a starter, what's your email, Emma?
My email is emma.brewster, BREWSTER, @sim.org.
Very good. Well, thank you again for taking time with us this afternoon or this morning to discuss some of these ideas. I think it's going to be an encouragement and very stimulating for our audience. We appreciate so much you investing together with us in this way.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be with you. And I do feel like we've just touched the surface. So explore it more deeply and keep on engaging.
Great. Thank you. Lord bless you. We hope this two-part episode with Emma has been helpful. This is such an important topic, and we trust the discussion has been full of grace and respectful of new, younger workers who have so much potential. Our heartfelt goal has been to build understanding while honoring all the generations as we seek to serve together. As always, you can find the show notes on our website at globalmissionspodcast.com, and we invite your feedback on our website or through Facebook or Twitter. We invite you to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play and ensure that you catch every episode as it's posted. That's all for today. The Global Missions Podcast is produced by the Jaffrey Center for Global Initiatives and Send International of Canada in collaboration with other like-minded agencies. On behalf of our entire team, we thank you for listening and invite you to join us in 2 weeks when we'll continue to explore this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.